Hey guys, it's your boy, Ballface8020, back again with another great commentary. Uh, yeah. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm really really out of it. Sleep deprivation. So there was this trend today on Twitter. Maybe it was on yesterday. I don't know. Talking about so-called MAGA Christians, just like the latest example of the left, going after American Christians for their alleged hypocrisy, of promoting stuff that's like actually against the teachings of what Jesus taught. And this is nothing new; they've been doing it forever. It kind of bugs me on two different levels. The first is that I've always really been opposed to people who don't practice or believe in a religion attempting to tell people who do believe in that religion what the proper standards of orthodoxy for it are. Like, even when W. Bush, like, tried to lecture Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda about what real Islam was. It's like Bush may or may not have been right because I don't know a lot about Islamic theology, but the thing is, but I tell you what, who's ever was right between the two of them about what Islam really teaches, I guarantee you Osama knows a lot more about Islam than Bush does. Even it doesn't mean Osama was right, but it just means that, that's a religion that he actually lived and practiced. And so, like, these, really, really very anti-Christian people um, going on and saying, oh, well, this is, these people are going against what Jesus taught or whatever. It's like, well, you're not really one to talk, because, whatever you think of American Christians, they at least believe the stuff. Maybe they don't always live up to it. Maybe their beliefs are just like incorrect, but they know what they believe better than you do. And, so, you trying to use, I would say it was something like, I think there's even an expression for it. It's like when the devil quotes scripture, where you saying, like, he doesn't believe the shit, but he'll quote it to, like, try to, like, move forward his own agenda. And so that's the one thing. The other thing is that what they say is just wrong. It's just completely wrong. And I don't know if it's just because they've never read, like, any of the gospels or what. Um, so, one thing I think needs to be understood is that in the Western world, and I'm saying, like, going back to the ages of the Roman Empire, Christianity, at least the Christianity that comes to us, I know there were different Christianities in the first century, maybe even beyond, but you have to keep in mind that where Christianity started in, Rome and Palestine, that is Judea, well, there was a massive war there in, 67, year 67. And that, like, where so the Jewish Christian movement, which was based in Rome and Palestine, was pretty much wiped out. Um, James, who took over at least the I don't know, the Judean version of Christianity. After Jesus died, he was executed in 62, and so Christianity as we know it was largely its biggest proponent, that people, the one who founded the churches mostly, was Paul, or people associated with Paul. So you can't just say, well, Jesus said this or Jesus said that, because Paul was the guy who's founding the churches, and he based a lot of his teachings on his personal revelations. He never knew Jesus personally in life, so he would say, and he was explicit about this. He said, the gospel I'm preaching to you doesn't come from James or Peter. We don't really know, like, how close, what his relationship with them was like. The gospel I'm preaching to you is stuff that Jesus has communicated to me personally. So that's always been Christianity. You don't have to agree with Paul's position. You don't have to agree that he was really in communication with Jesus, but that's been how, from the beginning of churches, that's how it's been defined. So it's not like, and so that was always, really important, and really a part of what we think of as Christianity. Again, you can agree with it or not agree with it, but we don't really have any churches in Roman Palestine, or I would just call it Judea, ancient Judea. Those churches didn't survive the Jewish revolt in 67 through 70. Or if they did, actually that's not true. We know at least some of them did survive, but I don't think they survived the second Jewish revolt, the Bar Kokhba revolt, which I think happened in the 130s. And if they did, it was barely, and they were certainly gone by the end of the second century. So that's one thing you need to keep in mind. And so you can't just say like, well, Jesus said this, because the gospel said it, and then leave it in a vacuum and just completely ignore what Paul said. Again, like it or not, Paul has always been a very important part of Christianity. Okay, it's just a fact. And there's even a term for it, Pauline Christianity. But Christianity is Pauline Christianity because none of the non-Pauline Christianity survived. So, that's that. So that needs to be recognized. But the other thing is, even Jesus, as he's portrayed in the Gospels, is not a liberal guy, like at all. Like he's really not. He's a very illiberal guy. Like I never understood this whole message of like Jesus, Jesus was meek, Jesus preached peace, Jesus was this like soft, loving guy. It's like, what Gospels are you reading? No, he wasn't. I mean, he was a pretty angry guy, and he was pretty. He threatened pretty much everybody who disagreed with him with maybe even eternal damnation, depending on how you interpret the text, but certainly at least everlasting destruction. And he and I'm not putting the guy down. I'm just talking about like the guy the Jesus we see in the Gospels. Let's actually understand how he's portrayed there, not like some image of how he's portrayed. And he had, what caused him to be crucified in the Gospel stories was because of him physically attacking people in the temple courtyard and knocking over tables and stuff like that. So and then he even has that line, "I come not to bring peace with the world, but with the sword." He says at one point, "Anybody who doesn't hate their father and brother can't follow me." So this was not a guy. I mean, true, it does seem like in the Gospels overall, if you read the whole thing in context, that he preached a nonviolent message. That's true. And it does seem, but it wasn't like an absolute nonviolent. Like he was certainly willing to use force. And so while he did preach overall nonviolence and forgiveness, that there was more to his message than that. So I think a lot of this stuff, they're saying, we see a bunch of different things with liberals talking about Jesus. One thing is they say is, well, Jesus, he was actually Middle Eastern and brown. It's like, well, not really. I mean, Jesus was, again, ancient Judea. He probably looked similar to what a modern Lebanese or a Samaritan looks like. And you can look up pictures of them. They're pretty white. I mean, they're white. Okay, they're clearly white. And Jesus today, if he lived in America, would consider himself white. It's just a fact. Okay, it's not. I don't think he would be a believer in white supremacy or anything, but it's just. I mean, he's got his caucoid features. Okay, I'm sure Jesus could easily have passed. I don't think he was like some. I don't think he could have looked like he came out of like a Nazi propaganda poster, but I'm sure he could have passed as like a British guy or an Irish guy or something. Maybe he didn't look like a Swede, but he's white guy. And the other is they're saying that he's Jewish. It's like, yeah, but this is America. Nobody cares about Jews. Like, I mean, the whole like Jewish angle, maybe in Europe or something, that would be a big deal. But nobody on the American right gives a crap about Jews. Okay, I mean, if anything, the people on the American right are pro-Jewish. So that's kind of a non-issue too. Although we will come back to it. Um, so no, and you know, so was he Middle Eastern? Well, Middle Eastern, like I said, it's a meaningless thing. I mean, the former Ed Bills quarterback Doug Flutie is Middle Eastern. I mean, I'm pretty sure he considers himself white because he is. So it doesn't like Ralph Nader is Middle Eastern. It's such a completely meaningless thing. He certainly wasn't Muslim if that's what they're trying to say. Um, then they'll say like, oh, Jesus himself was a refugee. Well, yeah, for like a day, right? like like he was a refugee for like a day in Egypt, and then Herod dies and he immediately came back home. So are they trying to say that he has anything to do with the refugees that existed today? But then they go the other thing. They said like, so the next thing you'll see is Jesus like a lot of these Christian schools have policies saying like you can't come here if you're gay or stuff like that. And again, you can agree or disagree with that. I don't really care. They say like, oh well, like you'll see this. You'll see liberals say this. Liberals will say stuff like, oh, Jesus would have hung out with the gays, and he would have condemned these people who are saying the gays aren't allowed to come to our schools. No, he wouldn't have, because Jesus was a ultra observant first century Jew. Okay, he was, and Jews have kind of always believed the same stuff. And even if you don't agree that Jews have always believed the same stuff, um, we know what Jews in the first century believed, and we know even from the Gospel of Luke, where Jesus is always butting heads with the Pharisees, right? The Pharisees are kind of, based theologically, or what modern Jews are. So Jesus is always butting head in the Gospels with the Pharisees, but he says clearly in the Gospel of Luke, his problem with the Pharisees is that they teach stuff that they don't do, and he says, but that doesn't mean you don't have to do the stuff that they teach, because the stuff that they're teaching is the problem is their hypocrisy. It's not what they're teaching. It's that they're not doing it. But that you need to, like, all the laws that they say you need to follow, you need to follow. And Jesus is very clear about that through his whole ministry. Now, theologically, again, going back to what Paul said that Jesus, upon his crucifixion and resurrection had fulfilled the law. So you don't need to worry about that stuff anymore. That's true. It is true. That is what Paul said. However, we don't have any documentation of Jesus during his lifetime saying that. Even in the Gospels, Jesus during his lifetime is saying, you do need to follow the law. So, and the non-Christians, the critics of Christianity, or these left-wing critics of Christianity, they're the ones who are saying, oh, well, you don't need to listen to Paul, just listen to Jesus. It's like, okay, well, Jesus said follow the law. And guess what? Believing, law-following Jews have always hated gays, because the law tells you to hate and persecute gays. I mean, that's just a fact. There's no Torah true rabbi who's going to disagree with that. Okay, the same thing. That's just a fact. And it has always taught to hate and persecute liberals. It has always taught to hate and persecute immigrants. That's just Judaism. All right, that's just like, literally there are no rabbis, there are no real true Torah true rabbis who would dispute what I just said. Okay, now when you actually get to the definition of what do we mean by hate and persecute, and what do we even mean by immigrants and stuff like that, yeah, okay, that would be there'd be some room for nuance, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this conversation, because you can look today. What do the rabbis in New York say to do about illegal immigrants to America? Okay, it's universal. They say kick them out. Who do those rabbis say to vote for? They all say to vote for Trump. And what do the rabbis say about gay rights? About like recognizing gay marriage and gay adoption and stuff like that. They all say it's prohibited. What do they say about liberals? They say that they're evil and you can't associate them. In fact, in Israel, this is kind of a little bit off topic, but in Israel, there was the ultra-Orthodox movement, and I know it's different now, but in the 80s and 90s, the ultra-Orthodox movement politically agreed with the left. They wanted to give up. They wanted to give up land to the other Arab states, but to the Palestinians mainly, in pursuit of a peace process. That's just something that, and it's complicated, but that's just something that the ultra Orthodox community has strongly believed in. They really believed in, you know, trying to avoid war and making concessions to the Arabs to save lives and to avoid war. That was something that was a really important thing to them. But even though it was something they strongly believed in, they were still adamant. The leading rabbis were still adamant. They said, even though we agree with the left on the policy versus the Arabs and the Palestinians, we still can't align with them. We still have to align with the right because we can't align with because we can't, as Jews, we can't work with liberals because liberals are evil. I mean, it was just it's just that's just Judaism. The thing is, that's just always part of it. So Jesus would have said the same thing. Jesus would have hated liberals. He wouldn't have hung out with them. He would have hated gays. He wouldn't have hung out with them. He would have hated these children crossing the border. He wouldn't have said to have them stay in America. This is so to say anything else is a complete misrepresentation of what the guy taught. And the thing is, look, I'm not a Christian. I don't think you have to follow what Jesus said in the Gospels. I'm not even sure he said a lot of the stuff that they say he said in the Gospels. But I just don't like the. I just want to call out the hypocrisy and just stupidity and ignorance that the left shows when they're trying to prove Christians wrong at their own game. And the left has always had this fantasy. I don't know if it's like this in the rest of the world, but the left in America has always under this fantasy that Jesus was actually one of us and that we understand Christianity better than Christians do. And to the answer to the first one, no, he was not. And the answer to the two, no, you don't. That's all for now, and I'll see you in the next.